Welcome to Puzzle Proof. Join us as we unravel today's captivating story and solve exciting puzzles together. Get ready to engage your mind. Let the journey start. Chapter 1. A Visitor in the Fog. It was upon a mist-laden morning in early October that an unusually mysterious case first cast its shadow across the modest comfort of 221B Baker Street. The lamps outside our lodgings glowed with that peculiar halos of light peculiar to a thick London fog, and the air was tinged with the acrid scent of coal smoke. Inside, however, all was quiet, but for the rustle of newsprint and the gentle clink of porcelain as I poured myself a second cup of tea. Sherlock Holmes sat opposite me, his long form curled indolently in the armchair by the hearth. He was wrapped in his worn dressing gown and occupied himself by lazily examining a violin string under the gaslight. His sharp eyes, though seemingly absorbed in minutiae, flicked towards the window with a suddenness that told me his attention was never far from the world beyond our four walls. "Curious fog," I remarked idly. "And according to the Times, the Admiralty claims it may last for days. Ships delayed at Tilbury and some nonsense about sea serpents near the coast of Dover." Holmes gave a soft, contemptuous chuckle. "The sea serpent is but the harmless diversion of a bored reporter and the unfortunate hallucination of a naval lookout, likely overfond of brandy." Before I could respond, there came a knock at the door. 3 short raps, precise and deliberate. Holmes's brow lifted only slightly. "Open the door, Watson," he said. "That will be Mr. Aubrey Thorne, recently returned from East Asia, formerly of Her Majesty's Royal Navy, and now reluctantly residing in 7 Dials. He has come to consult me on a matter most grave, though he himself does not yet grasp its full significance." I stared at him. "You've never met this man?" "Not once, but I heard the way he stepped off the curb just now, measured, with a slight drag in the left foot, naval training, and the letter he posted 2 days ago bore a watermark from a 7 Dials lodging house. Now, if you please." I obeyed, and upon opening the door, found myself face to face with a man of medium stature, his coat still beaded with moisture from the fog. He was perhaps in his early 40s, with a hardened look about him. His face was sun-darkened, his jaw square, his hair peppered with grey. Most notable was his left eye, milky and motionless. He removed his cap with a sailor's formality and nodded. "You are Mr. Holmes?" he asked. "I am," Holmes replied, gesturing to the armchair beside mine. "Come in, Mr. Thorne. I believe you have a matter concerning your late uncle Elias, the clockmaker of Clerkenwell." The visitor stopped short, clearly startled. Yes, precisely, but how did you—" Holmes steepled his fingers, his voice calm and unhurried. "You bear the scent of brass polish on your sleeves and fingers, a signature of those who handle horological instruments. Your boots are recently resoled, but already salt-crusted, suggesting travel through a port city. Likely the docks. And your left cuff carries a spot of blue ink, evidence of correspondence. The final clue is your posture. Your left shoulder is slightly lower than the right, indicative of naval service, where one often bears the weight of a kit bag on that side. These signs, though minor in isolation, combine to form a single, clear conclusion." The man sat down slowly, his gaze still fixed on Holmes with a mixture of wonder and unease. "They say you see things other men miss." Holmes offered a faint smile. "Only when they are worth seeing. Now tell me, what troubles you about your uncle's death?" Thorne exhaled, and I saw his fingers tighten around the brim of his cap. "It happened a fortnight ago. The coroner says it was an accident. He was found in his workshop, had apparently fallen backwards and cracked his head against a steel weight. But something about it doesn't sit right with me." "In what sense?" Holmes asked, already leaning forward. "He wrote to me," Thorne said, producing a folded letter. 3 days before his death, said he'd made a discovery of some importance, an ancient mechanism of dangerous import. Those were his words. He urged me to visit him at once. I left the next morning. When I arrived, he was already gone. The constable said he must have slipped while reaching for something on a high shelf. But I knew my uncle, Mr. Holmes. He was cautious, methodical. And his handwriting in that letter, it was hurried. Unlike him. Holmes took the letter with a kind of reverence. He examined the paper, then sniffed it. Heavy with the scent of machine oil. This was written in the workshop, most likely during his final hours. He passed the letter to me and I read it aloud. "Dear Aubrey, I have stumbled upon something old, mechanical, and quite beyond the ordinary. It may concern matters best left to history, but I dare not destroy it. Come at once. We must talk before the week is out. Time, quite literally, is of the essence. Yours, E." "Curious," Holmes murmured. "He signs it only with his initial. That is not customary?" "Not in the least," Thorne said. "He always signed his name in full, Elias Thorne, even on lists for the grocer. He prided himself on formality." "Then we may surmise he was in a state of unusual distress, or he feared being identified. Both are significant." Holmes stood abruptly and moved to the window, peering through the fog with narrowed eyes. "Mr. Thorne, if you are amenable, we shall visit your uncle's workshop this very afternoon. I should like to see the place where the accident occurred, and perhaps speak to the constable who first found the body." Thorne nodded at once. "Anything, Mr. Holmes. I want the truth." Holmes's voice was low but certain. "And we shall find it, but be prepared. Truth has a tendency to tick louder than expected once one winds the key." Chapter 2. The Death of Elias Thorne. We arrived in Clerkenwell just past 2 o'clock, the fog lingering like a half-forgotten dream across the rooftops. Though the October sun fought valiantly to pierce the gloom, it could not fully conquer the damp chill that had settled over the cobbled streets. Our cab clattered to a stop before a narrow, dark-bricked building bearing the faded sign, Thorne and Sons, horologists and engineers. A more solitary and silent place I could scarcely imagine. Holmes descended first, pausing to examine the rusted bell pull before entering. The shop's interior was dim and curiously still, as if time itself had momentarily ceased. Rows upon rows of clocks lined the walls, their delicate tickings overlapping into a steady, unnerving rhythm. Every size and shape was represented, grand old bracket clocks with carved mahogany faces, slender French mantelpieces, brass skeleton clocks with exposed gears, and even a peculiar contraption that seemed more sculpture than timepiece. Aubrey Thorne followed closely behind, eyes sweeping over the scene with a troubled air. "Nothing's been touched," he murmured. "I made sure of that. Uncle Elias would have wanted it kept just so." Holmes said nothing at first. He moved slowly, almost reverently, across the room. I watched as his keen gaze danced from one object to another, the dustless outline of a box on a shelf, the faint scuff marks near the back door, the placement of tools on the workbench. Each detail passed through his mind and was weighed, measured, and filed away with that unparalleled method of his. "This was where the body was found?" he asked, pointing to a cleared space beside the workbench. Thorne nodded grimly. He was lying there. The inspector believed he fell from the stool while adjusting the regulator, hit his head on the steel mainspring casing, died instantly. Holmes knelt beside the spot and examined the floorboards. "The bloodstain was cleaned?" "Yes," Thorne replied. "The constables took photographs and measurements, then had it washed away before I arrived." Holmes clicked his tongue softly. "I would have preferred the original state, but no matter. Do you know if anything was taken from the shop? Not that I can tell. The door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. The key was still in his pocket. Curious, Holmes muttered. And yet you believe foul play? Thorne hesitated. My uncle was many things, brilliant, obsessive, even reclusive, but not careless. He never climbed without securing the ladder, never left tools scattered, never hurried. But that letter I showed you, he wrote it in haste. You could see it in the ink, the spidery script. He was afraid of something. Holmes stood and turned to the workbench. The arrangement was immaculate. Screwdrivers aligned by size, gears sorted in velvet trays, and a single, peculiar brass cog set apart from the rest. Holmes picked it up and held it to the light. Mark this, Watson. See here, an engraving, Delta 7, an uncommon notation. Greek symbols in horology are rare, typically reserved for experimental ratios or coded references. This was no ordinary gear. He pocketed the cog and turned back to Thorne. What sort of projects did your uncle work on in his final months? Thorne shook his head. He didn't speak of them. But I know he kept private records, not here, somewhere else. He was secretive by nature. Ever since the war, he distrusted governments, scientists, even his own trade guild. Said too many tinkers and spies were poking into things they didn't understand. Holmes smiled faintly. That sounds like a man worth investigating. We moved next into the rear parlour, smaller and dustier, with an old writing desk pushed against the wall. Holmes examined it thoroughly, his fingers dancing over the drawers and beneath the frame. Presently, he pulled at a false panel concealed behind the lower ledge. With a soft click, a hidden compartment opened, revealing a small walnut box wrapped in oilskin. Aubrey let out a soft gasp. That's his cipher box. I haven't seen it in years. He never went anywhere without it. Holmes turned the box over in his hands. It was roughly the size of a loaf of bread, with a brass lock shaped like a four-spoked wheel. No key was present, and the mechanism was unlike any I had seen. It is coded, Holmes murmured, heavily so, and beautifully crafted. I dare say opening it will take considerable time, and the right mind. He looked pointedly at Thorne. Do you know the key? I don't, and I doubt anyone else does. He said it was for future eyes, or whatever that meant. Just then Holmes paused. He turned, eyes scanning the floor beneath the writing desk. Watson, he said softly, what do you make of this? I knelt beside him and saw what had caught his attention. Faint, crescent-shaped marks gouged into the wood floor. Not scratches made by heels or furniture, but something deliberate. There were 3, evenly spaced. Something heavy was dragged here, I said. Precisely. And yet nothing remains. He stood. I believe someone else was here that night, after Elias died, or rather, after he was killed. They found what they came for, or believed they did. But they missed the box. Thorne's face was pale. You think someone murdered him for this? He gestured at the cipher box. But why? Holmes's expression became unreadable. Because, Mr. Thorne, whatever lies within this box may not be mere invention or technical whim. Your uncle's letter speaks of danger, of a mechanism too significant to ignore. And when men speak thus before their sudden death, I begin to suspect their fears were not imagined. There was a moment of silence as the clocks resumed their quiet symphony of ticking, each beat now laced with the suggestion of hidden purpose. The shop felt colder somehow, less like a place of craft and more like a tomb. Holmes broke the silence at last. We will take the cipher box to Baker Street. There I shall begin its study. In the meantime, Mr. Thorne, make discreet inquiries. See if your uncle received any unusual visitors in the final weeks. Engineers, foreign clients, former associates. Do not trust the obvious answers. Look beneath the surface. Thorne nodded grimly. "And if I find something?" "Bring it to me," Holmes said simply. "This puzzle has only begun to turn, but already I hear the ticking of something much larger than a clock." Chapter 3. A Missing Piece. Back at Baker Street, the cipher box sat solemnly upon Holmes's desk like a silent sentinel, its brass dial glinting faintly in the gaslight. I could not help but gaze at it with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Though it was little larger than a jewellery casket, its presence seemed to occupy far more space in the room, demanding attention, whispering of secrets tightly bound in gears and code. Holmes had changed into his house coat and was seated cross-legged in his armchair, pipe in hand, staring fixedly at the cipher box as though by will alone he might divine its mechanism. The usual clutter of newspapers, chemical vials and stray monographs had been swept aside to make room for various lenses, fine tweezers, a micrometer gauge, and a battered notebook into which he occasionally scribbled observations in his precise, slanted hand. "Do you truly believe this box is the reason Elias Thorne was killed?" I asked. Holmes did not look up. "I believe it is the reason someone wanted him silenced. Whether it alone contains the motive remains to be seen. But note, Watson, how much care was taken in hiding it. A man does not go to such lengths for sentiment." I leaned closer, examining the strange dial. 4 spokes. Could it be a reference to a date, or perhaps compass bearings? "Possibly," Holmes murmured, "or a cipher built on rotational shifts. The craftsmanship suggests someone of mechanical genius, perhaps with a background in both cryptography and metallurgy. Not your average toy maker." He reached for his glass and began to examine the fine details of the locking mechanism. As he worked, a knock came at the door. Mrs. Hudson appeared, announcing with some hesitation the arrival of a rather persistent gentleman, sir. Foreign, I think. German, perhaps? "Show him in," Holmes replied without glancing up. A moment later, a tall, sharp-featured man entered. He was impeccably dressed in a grey overcoat and gloves, and his beard was clipped in the continental fashion. There was something in the angle of his gaze, cold, calculating, that reminded me faintly of a predator surveying unfamiliar terrain. "Good evening," the man said, with an accent that placed him somewhere between Berlin and Vienna. "Forgive the intrusion. I am Herr Dr. Emil Köhler. I believe you are investigating the unfortunate death of Herr Elias Thorne." Holmes looked up, his expression unreadable. "We are indeed. And may I ask what interest you have in the matter?" "I represent the Imperial Institute for Temporal Mechanics," Köhler said with a small bow. "We were in correspondence with Mr. Thorne regarding a project of some delicacy. It was theoretical in nature. A thought experiment, one might say, but he abruptly ceased writing 2 weeks ago. I travelled here to ascertain the reason." "And did he mention this box in your correspondence?" Holmes asked mildly, indicating the object on the desk. Köhler's eyes flicked toward it, only briefly, but I saw something flash there. Recognition? Alarm? "No," Köhler said smoothly. "Nothing of the sort. May I?" He gestured towards the cipher box. "You may not," Holmes replied, in a tone that was polite but immovable. "At least not until we understand what Mr. Thorne feared. Tell me, Herr Doctor, what nature of temporal mechanics would a retired clockmaker be of use in?" Köhler smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "You are an intelligent man, Mr. Holmes. I am certain you have already guessed that this project concerned more than horology. We believe Mr. Thorne discovered a particular configuration of gears, a harmonic resonance, capable of influencing the perception of time. Microseconds, perhaps, but with further refinement, you suggest he created a mechanism that alters time?" I said, incredulous. "No," Köhler replied calmly, "but he may have begun the work." Holmes leaned back, tapping his fingers together. Fascinating. And what is your institute's interest in such a mechanism? Scientific curiosity or military application? Kohler gave a diplomatic smile. I am a scientist, Mr. Holmes, not a soldier. Indeed, Holmes said coolly. And yet I believe the Prussian army funds your institute rather handsomely. There was a pause, long, tense, filled only by the soft ticking of our clock on the mantel. Kohler's smile faded. I came here to offer cooperation, Mr. Holmes. Should that be unwelcome, I shall take my leave. Holmes stood. By all means, but do not stray far, Herr Doctor. I suspect we shall speak again, soon. With a curt nod, Kohler turned and left. The door closed behind him with a soft but final click. I turned to Holmes. Do you believe him? I believe he is lying about the box, but not about its importance. That man is no mere scholar. I saw the outline of a holster beneath his coat. I started. Armed? Then surely... He is not here as a friend, Holmes finished. And neither, I fear, was Elias Thorne's visitor on the night he died. He walked to the window and pulled aside the curtain. He's not returning to a hotel. Number C, there, across the street. The man in the bowler hat. Kohler's watching us through an intermediary, likely an agent. I moved to the window, but caught only the back of the figure vanishing into the fog. Holmes turned back to the cipher box and stood over it, arms folded. We are not the only ones seeking the truth, Watson. But we may be the only ones seeking it for its own sake. He resumed his place at the desk and began once more to examine the dial, this time with renewed urgency. The Delta 7 inscription, it is not a name, but a sequence. Greek fourth letter followed by a numeral. A pattern, possibly musical, perhaps mechanical. And what of the gouges we found beneath the desk? I asked. What was taken? Holmes's eyes glittered. A companion piece, I suspect, a device with which the box interacts. That is the missing element in this affair, and until we recover it, the mechanism and its meaning will remain incomplete. He fell silent again, bent low over the cipher box, hands moving with delicate precision. Outside, the fog pressed against the window panes, and the evening shadows deepened. The mystery thickened like the mist beyond Baker Street, but I knew with the certainty of long experience, that Holmes had begun to glimpse the clockwork behind the crime. Chapter 4. The Cipher Unwound. The following morning found Holmes already at work. I awoke to the sound of his violin, though instead of the usual melancholy strains he was plucking single notes, short, precise, and mechanical. It was as if the instrument had been reduced to the function of a tuning fork. He ceased as I entered the sitting room, and without looking up, said, "Good morning, Watson. You'll be pleased to hear we have made progress in the night." I poured myself a cup of tea. "The cipher box? Indeed. I believe I have discovered its first key, and more importantly, the logic behind its construction." He gestured to the cipher box, now partially disassembled. The brass wheel had been removed, revealing a complex series of rotating discs within. Each was marked with numbers, musical notations, and Greek letters, all interlocked in a manner that suggested not mere concealment, but orchestration. Holmes pointed with a thin instrument to one such disc. Note the series of notes inscribed here, C, G, D, A, E, B, F, sharp. That is the circle of fifths, a progression used in tuning instruments. Now overlay this with the numeric pattern from the inscription Delta 7, the fourth Greek letter and the seventh position. What do you have? Intervals, I replied, still groggy. Musical ones, precisely. A coded sequence, perhaps even a harmonic password. This box is not just locked, it is meant to sing in its own fashion. He inserted a tuning fork into the mechanism, struck it gently, and let the vibration resonate against the open chamber of the box. There was a faint click. A small panel slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment lined with velvet. Inside was a bundle of delicate papers, schematics, notes, in Elias Thorne's unmistakably jagged hand, and a folded letter sealed in wax. Holmes gave a soft whistle. At last, he laid the papers out across the table. They were covered in sketches of intricate gear systems, some labeled with unfamiliar abbreviations, others with warning annotations, "Do not align inverted, dampening required," and one particularly ominous phrase, "Temporal lag must not exceed 1.2 seconds, risk of dissociation." Holmes read them in silence, his brow furrowed. I could see his mind turning like the gears he so often admired. After several minutes, he passed me the sealed letter. "Read it aloud, if you will, Watson. It is addressed to Aubrey Thorne." I opened the letter carefully. It read, "My dear nephew, if you are reading this, I am likely dead or vanished. I have entrusted this to no one but myself and the mechanism, which I pray you never touch until you understand it fully. The device is unfinished, but its potential is terrifyingly real. I believe I have stumbled upon a frequency resonance within mechanical timekeeping that, when calibrated correctly, distorts perceived time. It does not transport, do not mistake it, but it unhinges sequence. The risk of neurological severance is extreme. I am followed, I do not know by whom. A man calling himself Kohler approached me. I feigned ignorance. If he returns, trust nothing. The Prussians want this for war, others for profit. You must destroy the drawings or deliver them to someone incorruptible. My last test was successful. That alone makes me dangerous. Forgive me, Uncle Elias." I lowered the paper slowly. The room felt suddenly colder. Holmes stood and turned to the window. "He made it work, Watson, at least partially. This mechanism, this temporal resonance, is no longer theory. Imagine it. Not time travel, as fiction delights in, but time slippage, the decoupling of conscious experience from the flow of chronology." "Madness," I muttered. "Surely such a thing could never be precise." "No," Holmes agreed, "which is precisely what makes it deadly. A second too long and a man might become unstuck, his memory detached from sequence. He would speak before thinking, react before seeing. Such disorientation would be enough to destroy a mind or mask an assassination." He turned back to the papers and rifled through them again. "And this confirms my suspicion. A second mechanism was constructed, one capable of regulating the effect." "The missing device?" "Yes, and I believe whoever murdered Thorne has it." I felt a chill at the implication. "And they hold the means to complete the invention." Holmes nodded gravely. "Or to misuse it. Think, Watson, if an agent could momentarily desynchronize his perception, he might commit a crime in plain sight and be unable to recall it. Or worse, be used as a vessel for crime without ever knowing." Just then there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson entered with a telegram. Holmes read it silently and passed it to me. "From Aubrey Thorne. Have confirmed Kohler approached my uncle 3 times in September. Also 2 unrecorded visits from unnamed Frenchmen, possibly alias. Have found receipt for hotel near Paddington under name Bergeret. Will investigate." A. Thorne Holmes tapped the telegram. "We have another player, Watson, the Frenchman. Possibly a rival of Kohler's or perhaps an interested buyer." He turned back to the cipher box and tapped its casing thoughtfully. "This is no longer about invention alone. It is about possession. And we are racing men who will not hesitate to kill again." A silence fell between us, broken only by the low growl of a carriage passing below. Holmes stood suddenly and began pacing. "I must speak to Kohler again," he said, "but not as myself. He must believe I am still probing blindly. We will draw him out. In the meantime, you, Watson, shall accompany Mr. Thorne to this hotel. Find this Bergeret, if he is still there. Learn what you can. You suspect he has the second device? Or knows who does. Either way, it is time we turn the gears of this case ourselves. He placed the cipher box gently back into its casing. What began as the death of a clockmaker is quickly becoming a matter of international consequence, and I intend to wind this mystery back to its origin, tick by tick. Chapter 5. The Hotel Bergeret. The morning fog clung low over the rooftops as I made my way toward Paddington, the cold air thick with soot and silence. Aubrey Thorne accompanied me, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. Despite his stiff collar and polished shoes, he moved with the disquiet of a man no longer certain where his world ended and another began. "Do you think this Bergeret truly exists, Dr. Watson?" he asked, as we turned onto the long terrace where the hotel was situated. "I trust Sherlock Holmes's instincts implicitly," I replied. "If this man is connected to your uncle's final days, we must find him, whatever name he wears now." Hotel Bergeret was no more than a narrow townhouse converted into modest lodgings. A tarnished brass plate hung by the door, and a bell above it chimed with a tired ring as I pressed the button. A thin, grey-haired woman answered, her apron spotted with tea stains and her expression suspicious by habit rather than provocation. "Yes?" she asked, eyeing Aubrey and me as though we might be collectors or worse, journalists. I produced my card, Dr. John H. Watson. I believe a gentleman registered under the name Bergeret may have stayed here within the past fortnight. She frowned, then glanced back into the hallway. "Not many ask for old guests. He left last Wednesday. Frenchman, quiet sort. Paid in advance." "May we see the room he stayed in?" I asked. She hesitated. "I'm not supposed—" "Please," Aubrey interrupted gently, his tone urgent. "My uncle died recently. We believe this man may have seen him before his death." The woman softened at that. "All right. But don't take long." We followed her up 2 flights of narrow stairs to a room at the back. It was small, barely large enough for a bed, washstand, and writing desk. A single, cracked mirror hung above the basin. The air smelled faintly of tobacco and a cologne I couldn't place, something herbal, continental. "He left no forwarding address?" I asked. "None," the woman said. "Didn't even leave a handkerchief." Once she departed, Aubrey and I searched the room carefully. It was bare on the surface, but Holmes had trained me to look beyond first glances. I moved to the writing desk, opened its drawer, and examined the underside. There, tucked into the corner, was a single folded sheet of notepaper, perhaps fallen between the drawer lining and its wooden base. I extracted it with my tweezers and read it aloud. "Il cherche le second, mais il est déjà ailleurs. Je ne suis que l'intermédiaire. Le prototype doit rester hors de leurs mains. They seek the second, but it is already elsewhere. I am only the intermediary. The prototype must remain out of their hands." "No signature," I murmured. "And the ink is fresh. He must have written this only a day or two before he left." Aubrey paced, fists clenched. "So there is a second device, and this Bergeret fellow passed it on. Or concealed it." My eyes fell upon the corner of the mirror. A faint smudge, fingerprint perhaps. But no. On closer inspection it was a mark made deliberately. I angled the glass and the light revealed a series of tiny etchings in the silvering, a number and a letter. R4. "Holmes will want to see this," I said. We left quickly, thanking the landlady, and returned to Baker Street just past noon. Holmes was at his chemical table, holding a vial to the light. He looked up the moment we entered. "Did you find him?" "No," I replied. But we found his message. I handed over the paper and relayed the mirror's detail. The second is already elsewhere, Holmes muttered. So Bergeret passed the device to another, or perhaps hid it beyond reach. He read the note again. The prototype must remain out of their hands. Their hands, Kohler's most likely. But who else? He turned to Aubrey. Tell me, did your uncle ever travel abroad in recent years? France? Germany? Anywhere in the Low Countries? Aubrey shook his head. Not since his retirement. He had a loathing of ships and trusted only English soil beneath his feet. Holmes lit his pipe and stood, pacing. Then the foreign agents came to him. Kohler, Bergeret, and someone else. Possibly a buyer, possibly a thief, but the trail is narrowing. I showed him the mark on the mirror. R4. Could it be a location? Holmes's eyes gleamed. Rail platform? Room number? Locker? He turned to a set of railway timetables pinned above his desk and jabbed a finger at one. Paddington Station. Left luggage lockers are lettered and numbered. R4 is likely a concealed drop. He pulled on his coat with sudden urgency. Watson, with me. Aubrey, stay here. Should Kohler return, do not let him leave without alerting me. 10 minutes later, we stood amid the bustle of Paddington Station. Porters rushed past us with stacks of trunks, and coal smoke curled under the vast iron and glass roof. Holmes led us to the left luggage area where lockers of varying sizes lined the wall. He scanned quickly until he found R4, a large unit set at chest height. Producing a small ring of master keys, procured, I presumed, through channels only Holmes could navigate, he opened the lock. Inside was a wooden crate about the size of a shoebox, bound tightly with wire. No markings, no label. He extracted it carefully and set it on the nearby bench. Observe, he said. Using his penknife, Holmes snipped the wire and opened the crate. Nestled in straw was a second device. It resembled the Cipher box in dimensions, but its design was sleeker, chrome rather than brass, with a central disc flanked by two rotating arms. Unlike the first, this one hummed faintly as though something within it moved, even in stillness. Holmes lifted it gently. No controls, I said. No visible latch. Because it's meant to be activated by proximity, likely via harmonic resonance with the first box. Holmes turned to me, eyes sharp. This, Watson, is the prototype Elias warned of, and I fear it is not merely a clock, it is a catalyst. As we prepared to leave, Holmes's hand froze on the crate. A slip of paper, previously wedged beneath the straw, had fallen free. He picked it up. It read, in neat, angular script, if I disappear, follow the sequence, delta, epsilon, alpha, kappa. A sequence, I said. A code, Holmes replied softly. And a path to what lies beyond these devices. We have the prototype. Now we must uncover what it was built to change. Chapter 6. The Man in the Shadows. The days that followed our recovery of the prototype were charged with a kind of quiet urgency. Holmes, though not one to admit to unease, moved with the intensity of a man aware that time, ironically, was not on our side. Kohler had vanished from his Soho residence, the hotel records showed no further sign of Bergeret, and Aubrey Thorne remained under guard at Baker Street as Holmes delved deeper into the Cipher's legacy. What troubled me most was the device itself. Though silent, it seemed alive. I had caught Holmes more than once simply watching it, as if listening for a breath it had yet to draw. On the third morning, Holmes received an anonymous envelope sealed with black wax. Inside was a single scrap of newspaper cut from the obituary section. E.T., late of Holborn, departed this life in silence. The clock winds down. No name, no date. Just the cryptic message, Holmes studied it in silence, then laid it flat on the table. "They are warning us." "Who?" "The same man who followed Thorn, the Frenchman, or someone he warned." I leaned forward. But if Thorn was right, if he truly believed this invention could distort time, then whoever controls it could rewrite events in their favor. Not rewrite, Watson, misalign. Imagine if you could cause your enemy to misstep a moment too soon or too late. In a duel, in a negotiation, in a battle. He paused. History has always hinged on timing. This merely tightens the hinges. That same day, a telegram arrived from Inspector Lestrade. Kohler's name appeared on passenger manifest to Rotterdam. Departed 3 days ago, used alias K. Obermann. Investigation there ongoing. So Kohler had fled, but whether to regroup, hide, or deploy the device was uncertain. Holmes, however, was not ready to give chase. "No," he murmured. "He's no longer the center. He wanted the prototype, but Bergeret passed it on, and someone else sent us that obituary. Kohler is chasing a device we already have." "And if he learns that?" I asked. "He will come for it, but not alone." That night, a new visitor arrived at Baker Street. A tall figure in a long wool coat and gloves with his collar turned up and a slouched hat pulled low. Mrs. Hudson knocked gently before showing him in, her eyebrows knit with suspicion. Holmes studied the man as he removed his hat. The face beneath was pale, angular and watchful, early 40s perhaps, with eyes like glass marbles, sharp, unblinking. He introduced himself in a whisper of an accent. "My name is Marcel Duchesne. I was once associated with Elias Thorn." Holmes offered no pleasantries. "Then you are the man called Bergeret?" The visitor did not flinch. "That was one name. There are others. But yes, I am the one who met with Thorn before his death. I gave him the means to finish the device." "You're not French," Holmes said suddenly. Duchesne smiled faintly. "Number I am Swiss, Lausanne by birth, but the accent serves when needed." "What did you give Thorn?" I asked. "A component, a resonance crystal, very old, harvested from beneath the Jura Mountains. Its lattice is receptive to certain vibrational signatures." Holmes nodded slowly. "And the sequence he left? Delta, Epsilon, Alpha, Kappa. A code, a trigger phrase. The device has no buttons for a reason. It must be attuned to the user's voice and thoughts. The sequence primes it. When paired with the cipher box, it aligns perception to a calculated delay." Holmes sat back. "So the prototype alters the mind's alignment with time itself?" "For brief moments," Duchesne replied. "Too long and the subject becomes unstuck. Identity fragments. The test subjects at Geneva did not fare well." My stomach turned. "You experimented on people?" "Not I," he said quietly. "I left the project before it became military. But others did not." He turned to Holmes. "Thorn reached out to me, afraid. He had completed the core mechanism but refused to finalize it. He feared what it would do to others and to himself. He asked me to help dismantle it. I told him to hide it, to scatter the knowledge." "But someone wanted it complete," Holmes said. "Kohler?" Duchesne nodded. "And others. The French had agents watching Thorn as well. You were followed too, I believe." Holmes stood and crossed to the fire. He watched the flames reflect in the polished steel of the device on the mantel. "I believe the prototype may already be active," he said. Duchesne inhaled sharply. "Then someone has spoken the sequence." "Yes," Holmes said, perhaps even unconsciously. "But the device hums now, faintly but undeniably. Watson heard it first." "It should not activate alone," Duchesne said, "not without a resonance from the original cipher box." Holmes turned. "Unless it has already been synchronized and is waiting." He lifted the device and held it to his ear. "It is not a weapon," he said, softly. "It is a tuning fork for time, and someone, somewhere, is about to strike it." Suddenly a knock came at the door, urgent, breathless. Aubrey Thorne burst in, face pale. "There's been a fire," he gasped. "My uncle's workshop, it's gone, burned to the ground, nothing left." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Then we have little time." "What do you mean?" Aubrey asked. "They're covering their tracks. First Thorne, now the records. They'll come for the prototype next." He turned to Duchenne. "Can it be destroyed?" Duchenne hesitated. "Not easily. If damaged, it may discharge unpredictably, like shattering a loaded spring. Then we must hide it, somewhere no one will look." Holmes turned to the wall, safe behind his chemistry shelves. He opened it, placed the device inside, and sealed it with 3 iron locks. "There," he said, "until the time comes to end this." He turned to us both, eyes sharp. "I now know who the third player is," he said. "Not Kohler, not Duchenne, but someone who was always watching, who left the obituary, who lit the fire." "Who?" I asked. "A man who wants the device not to use, but to bury, because he knows it was used before." He paused, and in the flickering light of the fire, he smiled. "Tomorrow we go to the source." Chapter 7. Shadows at the Source. The following morning dawned grey and restless, with rain tapping against the windows of 221B Baker Street. Holmes, already dressed and ready, stood by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed beyond the room, as if peering into some distant, invisible world. "We must visit Holborn," he announced abruptly, his voice steady but resolute. "To Elias Thorne's workshop." Aubrey Thorne nodded, his expression shadowed with grief and determination. "If anything remains, we must find it." Despite the fire that had ravaged the building days earlier, the site had not yet been sealed off. Lestrade had granted us permission to investigate, trusting Holmes's urgency. As we stepped into the rain-slicked streets toward the ruins, I could not help but feel the weight of something unseen pressing on us all. The workshop was little more than a charred skeleton. Blackened beams rose like broken bones against the dull sky, and a bitter, acrid smell clung to the air. Amid the ruins, scattered fragments of paper and twisted metal caught Holmes's keen eye. "See here," he said, kneeling beside a cluster of debris. "These fragments bear evidence of chemical treatment, an accelerant, no doubt." He pointed to a half-burnt ledger, its edges curled and blackened, but the ink largely intact. Holmes carefully lifted the pages with a pair of tweezers and began to examine the writing. "These are financial records," he murmured. "Lists of payments, supplies, and curious entries to a name here, Dr. Voss." Aubrey's brow furrowed. "I don't know that name." Holmes stood and faced us. "Nor did I. But I intend to learn who Dr. Voss is and why he appears in your uncle's final days." We returned to Baker Street, where Holmes wasted no time. With the ledger in hand, he contacted his network of informants and began piecing together the identity of this mysterious doctor. By evening, news arrived. Dr. Friedrich Voss, a physicist and engineer formerly affiliated with a covert branch of the British Admiralty, had disappeared from public records after a scandal involving experimental weaponry. Some whispered he had been dismissed for reckless pursuits bordering on madness. Holmes looked grim. If Thorne sought Voss's expertise, it suggests a far more dangerous dimension to the prototype than we imagined. The following day, Holmes arranged a discreet meeting in a small private room at a quiet club near Pall Mall. We waited until nightfall, when shadows lengthened and the world seemed to hush. A man entered, tall, gaunt, with a face etched in worry and eyes sharp as a hawk's. He introduced himself simply as Friedrich Voss. Holmes wasted no time. "Mr. Voss, your name appears in the financial ledger of Elias Thorne's workshop. Can you explain your involvement?" Voss's gaze flickered to Aubrey. "I only assisted Elias in refining the resonance crystal. We both knew the dangers, but ambition blinded us." "Did you know of Kohler and Bergeret?" Holmes pressed. "They came later," Voss replied grimly. "I warned Elias to cease his work, but they were relentless. After his death, I vanished to avoid their reach." Holmes leaned forward. "And this device, was it used?" Voss swallowed hard. "Once, in an experiment that went horribly wrong." He looked at each of us in turn. "A volunteer was subjected to the prototype's effect. He lost his sense of time, his memories scrambled. We had to stop." Holmes folded his hands. "And this volunteer?" "A soldier, name lost to history, but his fate was a warning." Holmes nodded slowly. "A warning that was ignored." Suddenly the room's gaslight flickered. Voss's expression darkened. "You must destroy it," he said, "not hide it. The device is a weapon against the mind and reality itself." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Someone else thinks so too. They have already begun." At that moment, a shadow detached itself from the doorway. A tall figure stepped into the gaslight, a man whose presence chilled the air. "Kohler," I whispered. The intruder smiled coldly. "You think you've uncovered all the secrets, Holmes? This device belongs to the future, and I intend to wield it." Holmes remained calm, hands steady. "You underestimate the consequences, Kohler. The prototype's power is not yours to command." Kohler's smile faded. "Perhaps, but I have allies, resources beyond your reach." The room tensed. Voss, Aubrey, Holmes and I, all caught in the crossfire of a battle invisible to the world, but vital to its fate. Holmes took a step forward. "Then we end this tonight, one way or another." The confrontation was swift and decisive. Kohler, realizing he was outmatched, fled into the fogged streets, but not before Holmes extracted a vital clue from a slip of paper in his pocket, a series of numbers and letters matching the sequence from the cipher box. Holmes turned to us, eyes alight with determination. "The sequence, Delta, Epsilon, Alpha, Kappa, is the key to controlling the device. Kohler sought to control it, but so must we." He looked at Aubrey and Voss. "We must return to the workshop's ruins. The answers, and perhaps the final piece, lie there." As we stepped back into the night, the city's shadows stretched long and threatening. Yet Holmes moved forward with that trademark calm certainty. "We are on the brink of unveiling the truth, Watson. But beware, the closer we come to light, the deeper the shadows grow. Let me know when you want me to write Chapter 8 and bring the mystery to its conclusion." Chapter 8, The Unseen Thread. The air was thick with rain and expectation as we returned to the ruins of Elias Thorne's workshop, now a cold and desolate shell. The city around us was oblivious to the unfolding struggle, an invisible war for mastery over time itself. Holmes moved ahead, his eyes sharp and deliberate, as if following a thread invisible to others. Aubrey and I brought up the rear, and Dr. Voss stayed close, a silent sentinel, shadowed by guilt and hope. Holmes paused at a pile of rubble near what had once been the workshop's rear wall. His fingers sifted through broken bricks until he unearthed a small metal box, blackened but intact. It bore no markings, only a faint engraving of the same Greek letters we had seen before: Delta, Epsilon, Alpha, Kappa. "Here lies the missing link," Holmes said softly. I stepped closer, fascinated by the weight of the moment. "What is it?" "A failsafe," Holmes answered. "Thorne's last act, a safeguard against those who would misuse his work. He unlocked the box with a delicate key he produced from his coat. Inside lay a series of microfilm strips, a compact journal, and a small crystal shard, the resonance crystal Duchenne had described. Holmes took the journal and began to read aloud. The device, as conceived, manipulates the brain's perception of time, creating a delay or acceleration in cognitive processing. This can provide a tactical advantage, but the risk is great: disassociation from reality, loss of self, or worse. The failsafe is designed to reverse or neutralize the effect, if properly triggered by the sequence. Holmes's voice dropped. Thorne feared the prototype would destroy more than lives. He believed it could unravel the very fabric of a person's identity. Voss nodded. His warning was not just scientific, but moral. The device is a double-edged sword, power without conscience. Holmes replaced the journal carefully. We now hold the key to controlling or ending this threat. Aubrey spoke, voice steady but wary. Then why has Kohler pursued it so relentlessly? Because, Holmes said, he believes he can harness it to rewrite history, to bend events in his favor. I frowned, but history is not so easily altered. Holmes smiled faintly. Ah, Watson, that is the crux. The device does not rewrite history, it distorts perception. Those affected may believe their reality shifted, but the external world remains unchanged. The advantage lies in disrupting opponents' decisions at crucial moments. He looked at the crystal shard. A weapon, yes, but one of confusion rather than outright destruction. Holmes turned to Voss and Aubrey. We must use the failsafe to deactivate the prototype, but first, we must locate Kohler's final move. We gathered around a small map, spread over a flat stone. Holmes traced the path with his finger. Kohler's movements lead here, to the old clock tower by the Thames, a symbolic place for one who toys with time. The rain slackened as we made our way toward the tower, the city's gas lamps flickering in the mist. Inside, the great clock mechanism loomed, its gears silent, frozen in time. Holmes's eyes scanned the walls until he found a hidden compartment behind a loose panel. Inside lay a small case, wrapped in oilcloth. He opened it carefully. The prototype, the chrome device, glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Suddenly footsteps echoed on the stairs. "We are not alone," Holmes said quietly. Kohler emerged from the shadows, his face pale but fierce. "You are too late, Holmes. The device is already active. Soon the world will see the future as I dictate it." Holmes stepped forward, voice calm but resolute. "Your hubris blinds you, Kohler. The prototype is not a tool for conquest, but a test of restraint." Kohler raised the device, preparing to activate it. Holmes spoke the sequence clearly. Delta, Epsilon, Alpha, Kappa. The device's hum intensified, then dimmed. Kohler faltered, clutching his head. The failsafe activated, a wave of clarity surged through him, breaking the distortion. Kohler collapsed, breathless but lucid. Holmes knelt beside him. "You see now the cost of this power, not in victory, but in the loss of self." Aubrey and Voss came forward. "The device will be secured," Holmes said, "neither destroyed nor wielded, but locked away from those who would abuse it." As Kohler was taken into custody, Holmes turned to me with a rare softness. "Watson, this case reminds us that time is not just measured by clocks, but by moments of choice and restraint." I nodded, understanding at last the invisible thread Holmes had followed, a thread woven not just through clues and codes, but through the very fabric of human nature.